The external research and internal feedback from the UVA community is clear. Regular feedback is the key to having successful performance conversations in a successful organization. More importantly, employees across all age generations prefer feedback that is both in person and from their manager. So in this video, we'll provide you with some quick tips on how to give feedback as a manager. For this first section, we'll go over a few important steps to follow when giving feedback. Regardless if you're giving constructive feedback or positive feedback, you should always follow these steps. The first is to give feedback immediately. Next is to always give the feedback in private. This can be a phone call, a Zoom meeting, an office, or a conference room. Or just pull the person to the side away from where people can't overhear you. You want to show respect for the person, and you also don't want to have any distractions. The next step is to follow the Situation Behavior Impact Framework, or the SBI framework. Using this framework will ensure your feedback is specific and objective. Before we go over the SBI framework in more detail, let's look at an example of manager feedback to an employee. Jane, you're an excellent employee who contributes regularly to the team. I love your energy in getting projects done ahead of schedule. However, sometimes you can be a little rude to your coworkers. I'd like you to work on your collaboration to be more of a team player. The problem with this example of feedback is that it's extremely vague, and vague equals judgmental. Anytime your feedback is vague, you risk the person receiving it to feel like you're being subjective or attacking them personally. The SBI framework helps prevent this. The goal of using the SBI framework is to help your feedback be more specific and objective, leading to more meaningful and effective feedback. It starts with describing the situation. This is the where and when, or a specific project or task the person is working on, for example. Next is to identify the behaviors the person is showing. What actions caused a positive or negative impact? Then describe the impact, which is simply how you thought or felt in reaction to those behaviors. So back to our feedback example. Let's see how we can improve it using the SBI framework. What makes Jane an excellent employee? And what does she do to contribute to the team? What does it mean to have energy? We'll pretend the scenario was a key project she worked on, so we can give the feedback as follows. Jane, with the team's ongoing redesign project, I noticed you have proactively led the communications portion of our project. You connected with all the stakeholders weeks before the rollout to learn about their needs and concerns. We've been able to stay ahead of schedule thanks to your initiative. This feedback is specific because it describes the situation and identifies the person's actions and behaviors. And by avoiding vague descriptions like, I love your energy, and instead describing the observable behaviors like proactively connecting with stakeholders before a deadline, the feedback is more objective. And the impact is clear. Because of Jane's behaviors, the team was able to complete parts of their project ahead of schedule. Now that example was obviously positive feedback, but what about giving constructive feedback? As you probably guessed it, it follows the same process. So let's take that constructive feedback for Jane and put it into the SBI framework. The situation. Jane, during our weekly 11 a.m. project team meetings. The behavior. You interrupt your coworkers often. The impact. It is frustrating for the team and prevents us from discussing ideas openly. So as you can see, this feedback is much more specific and is less personal. Telling Jane that she interrupts others identifies her actions that can be observed by anyone. Now, after you've given a person feedback, there are two things you should do next. The first is to simply ask them, what do you think? This is a critical step when giving feedback. For a person to value and trust your opinion, they need to have an opportunity to speak for themselves and be heard. The final step is to give a recommendation. Giving a recommendation means providing the person with the steps they can take to improve their behaviors or what they can do to continue a positive behavior. For example, Jane, going forward in our meetings, I'd recommend that after you share your thoughts with the group, you ask a question to everyone and then go as long as you can before you share your thoughts again. This will encourage others to speak, and they'll see you as someone who is a team player who wants to collaborate. This gives clear guidance on what is expected. Remember, Vague equals judgmental, so we want to be specific, and it helps coach the person to do better. If you're giving positive feedback, the recommendation may be as simple as, I'd continue to connect with stakeholders in advance of the project deadline. Or it could coach them to go above and beyond, such as, I would continue to connect early with our stakeholders, and you could also include someone like John from accounting to give us more insight into how the organization budgets for projects. Again, your recommendations should provide clear guidance and coach the person to develop. So to recap, give feedback in a timely manner and in the appropriate setting. Use the SBI framework. Ask the person for their thoughts on the situation, and then provide them with a recommendation that shows you want to help them be successful. Now, we understand that not every scenario will be perfect, and the person may not respond well to your feedback. So here are some final things to consider and a few tips to help you with giving feedback. If the person you are giving feedback to becomes defensive or argues, it's important that you stay calm and stick to the facts. Stick to your script and focus on what behaviors the person needs to demonstrate in order to be successful. Thank you for watching this video segment in our Giving and Receiving Feedback series. We hope this helps you with your feedback sessions and improves engagement for your team and the organization. If you need any more assistance, just let us know, as we're always here to help.